Okay, where we had stopped off in the chronology was right here at Wa, which is the 252nd syllable in Isaiah 53. And this is something that Daniel ties to. He ties to it this way. If I can wait for the stupid mouse. Here is the 385th syllable in Daniel. That is in Daniel 9:12. Daniel 9:12. Oh, my computer is so slow. Daniel 9:12 ends at 698 BC when Manasseh is born. What Daniel is doing is he's tracking to Isaiah on two levels. He's tracking to Isaiah at the time he makes his prayer, which is right here, which is technically, 539, beginning of 538 BC. But in his own syllabification, he's also tracking to the Manasseh period, which was right here in Isaiah, syllable 133, Isaiah 52. This whole section here in Isaiah 53 is Manasseh, all the way from the beginning of Isaiah 53:1 all the way to the last word in the second clause of Isaiah 53:3, which is holy, meaning grief. Okay? And that's where Daniel is tracking to, as we're going to see more when we get into Daniel. But I have to introduce it now so that I can show you the relationship of what Isaiah is saying and what Daniel is saying, to introduce it. In Daniel, he does this by making the difference between his syllable 385, which is divisible by 7. That the last place he had a paragraph divisible by 7 was in Daniel 9:7, which covers the period from Solomon to the 11th year of Asa, those kings. And so the difference between 182 and 385 is 203, and he's tying deliberately, by doing that, he's tying right here to syllable 203 in Isaiah. Just take my word for it for now, because I'm going to be covering why he's doing that more in detail in the later Daniel videos. But I want you to understand right now that 49 syllables after that, see, because he's also making this Daniel 9:13 divisible by 7 at 49 years. Okay, well, mapping it out, if 203 is 586 BC, when the temple goes down, 49 years later is right here at Wa, where Daniel says he's doing his prayer. Remember, he had the 49. See, this is where Daniel 9:4 ends. It's divisible by 7. It's a date line. 49 years after the temple falls. So what Daniel is doing is he's coming full circle back to the beginning of his prayer by tagging, which I'm going to get into more, tagging Isaiah 53 at the 203rd syllable, and then 49 syllables later, that's at syllable 252 in Isaiah, which is right here when Daniel prays. Okay, that's what Daniel's going to do. Now, I didn't need Daniel to know that, but I'm surprised that Daniel's doing that. And what he does is, by doing this, he's tracking the kings, he's tracking to Isaiah and Psalm 90, which we're going to see in later videos. And he's coming full circle on two time tracks. First his own, full circle to the time he's praying, and then full circle on Israel's kings, which ends right here. This is where he ends the narration of the kings, using the meter to do it. And the text in each verse has to do with that historical period that is covered by his meter. And he's getting that from what Isaiah is doing here. That's why I'm going through it. So here at Isaiah, right here, Wa and God, okay, the wa is usually not translated in English because it's just a connective. It just means that the discourse is continuing. Yahweh, of course, is the most common name for God in the Bible. It's the sacred tetragrammaton. People think it's Jehovah. That's a bunch of baloney. The actual spelling Jehovah is only in the Bible like 49 times. Over 5,000 times it's spelled Yahweh. right here is one of them. Okay, so if you want to figure out the real name for God, that's the sacred tetragrammaton, it's Yahweh, and it's vowel pointed as Yahweh. I don't know how the scholars could have missed it. They keep thinking there should be an O, okay, between the H here. Here's the H. That's the H, the He, and the wow, which they call Vav today. They think that there's supposed to be an O between them. Not necessarily. There are lots of words in Hebrew where you don't have a vowel in between because it's a liquid consonant, the wow. So it's Yahweh. So if you want to know God's real name said more than 5,000 times, and even the Masoretes vowel pointed it that way, I'm going to say it's like 5,600 times total in the Bible, and over 5,000 of them belong to Yahweh. Okay? Not Yahweh, Yahweh. See? Because this is a yod, and there's no vowel sound underneath it, so it's a yes sound. Okay? Oh well. So, Yahweh, this is a 252nd syllable in Isaiah, and it corresponds to the end of 539 BC. Okay? You with me? Now I'm going to go full scale on this, because I want to show something. So here we are at beginning of 538 BC, end of 539 BC, right there. That's when Cyrus takes over. That's when Babylon is defeated. That's when Daniel 5 ends. Many, many tekel upharsin. That same night, it's closing the chapter of Daniel 5. That same night, Belshazzar and all of his people were taken over by Gobi Ras, who was the general. Cyrus was the king in charge, and his uncle, who should have been king instead, Darius the Mede, ends up taking over Babylon on behalf of Cyrus. Okay, so notice this, Yivki. That's from Pagah. It means to intercept, as I covered in previous videos. It means to strike the mark, to hit the mark, to intercept, to take over. So see how appropriate that is? Again, this whole thing here is first David to last David in its primary meaning. But each clause has a meaning about the king or Israel during that time, to show that all history is wrapped up in Messiah, from first David to last David, that its purpose got fulfilled, and then he's basically doing a little annual high. This is the characterization of the time. And like from here on down, excepting the word holy there at the end, if you cut that out. But just go from here all the way down. Alright, that's Manasseh. Okay? And then this is Josiah, and this is Josiah, and then Josiah's term ends right here. Umakovenu. Our sufferings, our hurts. He dies in 609 BC, and then in 607, that's when our boy Nebuchadnezzar takes over, and this is Sabalam, ending at 605, 604 BC. And there's an adjustment for beginning and ending of year that keeps on running through this. So, and we despised him. We considered him, meaning Christ, struck and crushed. Yeah, so this is the time period when, right, starting at Sabalam, right, starting here, this is the time period when Israel is struck and crushed by Nebuchadnezzar. And it's in 2 deportations. The second deportation started here in this clause and ends with the temple. So this whole year, this is 597 to 586 BC. The temple. And you see me say this many times now. God raped. God being raped or God doing the raping. The temple goes down. Okay, and by here, it's the 49th year. The sabbatical years are now about to be up. Daniel's praying at the beginning of the last sabbatical year. And then Cyrus takes over. I mean, Cyrus has taken over it since this point here, ever since Yahweh. Okay, because that's really 539 when he takes over. It's the same year. Okay, and then this is Hifkiah, the 3 years that Darius the Mede will be ruling. Okay, and during these 3 years is when Israel is intercepted and goes back to the land. See, this word here in Hebrew means to intercept, to hit the mark, to shoot your arrow and it hits the target properly. Hifkia. Is that pregnant or what? This is when they return to the land to start rebuilding. And then this means that this is saying that and God hit him, meaning Christ, hit him. This is the him part. And then et is the direct object marker with sins. Awon means sin. And then kulanu, ours. So our sins are being hit at this point. See, this is after Israel's back in the land and she built the foundation and she's doing the sacrificing every year. Okay, so this takes us to 530 BC, this period. Okay, and during that time, she hadn't built the temple, but she had built the foundation. She did build the altar. She was doing the sacrifices as she was supposed to. And then here at the end, this marker here, here I'm highlighting white, that little colon, the two diamonds there, that marks the end of the verse, end of verse 6. Okay, that is when Cyrus dies. Okay, this is pregnant or what? So Cyrus dies, but Israel's in the land, and Boet Awon Kulanu. Okay, the sacrifices are being done to the lambs representing him, who is struck for our sins. See, this is very meaningful for that period in Israel's history. Okay, but it gets even better than that. Now, I'm going to start going fast now because I got to cover so much more. Okay, this is the next 7 years. This is from 530 BC, okay, to 523 BC. The temple still hadn't been rebuilt. Only the foundation was laid. But in this period, from 523 to 516 BC, that was when Haggai 2 occurs. That was when God went to Zerubbabel and said, "Hi, your kid," Zeru means seed, Zerubbabel means seed of Baal. This is so cute. In Haggai 2, God says, "Yeah, well, I'm going to put my signet ring on you," instead of Jeconiah. "I'm going to put my signet ring on you," which means that the seed of Zerubbabel, Zeru means seed, okay. And the seed of Baal is going to have seed of Messiah. His seed is going to be Messiah. And that's why you see him listed in the genealogies of both Matthew 1 and Luke 3. Okay? And so the verse here says, "Welo yiftach piu." He didn't open his mouth. Okay? He didn't open his mouth. Yeah, because from 523 until 516, they stopped complaining and sitting on their hands and started rebuilding, because God said rebuild in Haggai 2. I'm going to make Christ's birthday the anniversary of the foundation of the temple on 24 Kislev. That from this day forward, he keeps on saying twice. That's so cute. In Haggai 2. And that day would end up being called Hanukkah. Okay? So they're finished by 6 Adar rebuilding the temple. Or 3 Adar, I forget which. It's in Ezra 6:15 or Nehemiah 6:15. I think it's Ezra 6:15. So they finished building the temple in Adar, which is the end of 516 for the Jewish calendar. It's the beginning of 515 in our calendar. Okay, so then after that, there are a series of marks, but there's nothing particularly distinguishable until you get here. Okay. Now, as you might remember, let's bring this boy up. Oops. There we go. There we go. This is good enough. As you might remember, this is 126 years. Let's see if I can get it to give me a cut. This is 126 years right here. All right. See, I'm moving it. Okay. That's 126 years. And that 126 years is the time that the temple had left to run if the temple had well, I'm going to have to leave it, I guess. I can't get it to be bigger. You can sort of see the numbers here, okay? This is the amount of time the temple had to run, 126 years before it would have finished its time grant. It had a time grant that was supposed to last. Okay, the time grant here was supposed to last. This is when the time that the temple was down. But this 329 syllable here is 460 BC. All right? That's when the temple should have lasted. It should not have gone down here in 586. It should have lasted until down here, 460 BC, because it was dedicated in 950 BC. That's 1 Kings 8:1. All right? And it's got its companion passage in Chronicles, and that's how we know when it happened. All right, so the 490-year time grant given to the temple should have ended here. So what Isaiah is doing, he's giving you an annual chronology from when the temple goes down, but he benchmarks it right here, okay, to 460 BC at the end of the verse, at the very end of the verse, which is right here. That's 460 BC. At the beginning of the verse, right where this M is that I'm highlighting, see Ps90 neglamo. The text is, the sins of my people hit him. Okay? The sins of my people hit him. What is sin? It's a vote. And what is this period right here beginning with the M? That's when the historical voting period for believers was supposed to begin. But it was in breach because why? Because the temple went out 126 years short. So in the last 7 years of what should have been its time grant, that was when the voting window was going to begin for believers. So the world should have ended right here. But because Daniel prays right here, in 539, into 539 BC, the temple gets rebuilt here. Okay, it's 530 to 523. 523 to 516 is right here. Temple's rebuilt. And therefore, 460 BC is allowed to occur, beginning at 467. That's why Isaiah's benchmarking it as 7 syllables. Because the voting period begins at the beginning of this clause. Ps90 neglamo. The sins of my people hit him. Yeah. And sins are votes. And they voted to rebuild the temple right here. They voted to rebuild, so now the temple is getting the sacrifices. So the sins of my people hit the sacrifices, and the sacrifices are being made. So then this voting period can stay alive and people can vote, so that they can vote for the sins to hit him. They can vote for him. They can vote to believe in him and be saved. Otherwise the world would have ended. And that voting period begins right here, where I'm highlighting it now, with the M, and it ends, it doesn't end, but the ending of the temple time grant, had the temple stayed up, ends right here at 460 BC. Okay, so that's where Isaiah is still going on with this timeline, and it's still consecutive at this point. This 460 BC is shown above here, in this window here that I'm moving the cursor in the top middle of the screen. This is a voting window for history that you've seen before. And the window that Isaiah is measuring is going from here to here. Okay? This whole period right here. That's being measured down here, the lower center of the screen where it's in white. You know, see where I'm moving it, where the program is misbehaving again. That is what Isaiah is referencing, and he's referencing it to balance the time. Because again, coming here to the lower right hand side of the screen, you see where this section is moving. You see the 56 and the 70. This is how short the temple was when it fell. Okay, so the idea was to get time back on track. And that whole issue was exactly what Moses has been targeting, as you've seen many times now, in Psalm 90, verses 16 and 17. This was his warning. He was warning about this period right here. So Isaiah is balancing to Moses' accounting here. All he has to do is reference that first period. He's going to reference more than that, but this is where he starts it right here. And at this point, the temple time is balanced. And of course, Israel got to that time because over here, between 523 and 516 BC, right here where I'm moving the white in the middle of the screen, she had rebuilt the temple. Welo yiftach piu. Okay, my bad American accent. That's what the Hebrew says, which means he didn't open his mouth. In other words, they weren't busy complaining, they were busy building, doing what God told them to do. In Haggai 2, which occurred in 521 BC, 522, 521, something like that. Probably the end of 522. So, Isaiah, oh no, tell me that this is not going to be bad again. My computer's going slow. I'll try to get it done as best I can. Hopefully we won't crash this time again. So when Isaiah is covering this, that's 460 BC at the end, okay, which was the voting period right here, all right? Voting period for the world. The whole idea was time would end if we didn't get to this point. But we do get to this point, first of all, because Purim doesn't have the conclusion that the Jew haters wanted, all right? And instead, Nehemiah 6:15, okay, he goes back, the wall is rebuilt. All that was down was the wall, okay? And Isaiah's going to cover that too, as we're going to see here, okay? Because Isaiah goes on in his timeline. This is the next 9 years, okay, from 560 down to 551. And then here is where the Nehemiah passage occurs. 7 years later, 444 BC. And wouldn't you know, that's when most scholars think that Nehemiah went back instead of 446 BC. But again, we got a 2-year rounding, and it depends on how you're accounting your AD and BC dates. So that's close enough. Okay, you know, I don't know how they got 444, but that's obviously, there's some accuracy to that. Okay, but 446 was the deadline. And in 444, Nehemiah goes back, and Isaiah is benchmarking the fact that he went back and the walls were completed. Now look at the text here. Okay, this was the at-risk period, right in here, these first 2 clauses. Okay, the first 2 clauses are about Messiah, but look at their dual entendre. Wayitin et kashaim kiro. And that says, that what that basically means in English is, I'll give to them his grave, to the evil, to the treacherous. It's usually translated wicked, but it really means treacherous. I'll give to the wicked, to the treacherous, his grave. In other words, all they're going to get for all their trouble is that they kill him. Okay, so the whole goal, oh, this is so annoying. The whole goal was to kill Jerusalem. And they get a grave for that. That's all they get. They don't really succeed in killing Jerusalem because Nehemiah goes back and rebuilds the walls. Right here. This section. And this section says, Wetashir vemotai. Okay, with the rich man in his deaths, plural. This is plural in Hebrew, and all the Bibles mistranslate it. 2 deaths on the cross. First, spiritual, substitutionary spiritual death, and secondly, physical death. And I show the Hebrew of this in detail, of this verse, in my KJVOB videos on Isaiah 53:9. I did 3 videos on that, explaining it, showing it. Deaths. With the rich man in his deaths. Okay. Who's the rich man going back there? He gets the money to rebuild the walls from who? Artaxerxes Longimanus. There's no human king decree. As we're going to see when we cover Daniel 9. It's only God's decree. There's no human king decree. But a rich man, this is the word for rich, Rishaim, Ashir. Okay, that means rich man. It really means rich. It can be an adjective or a substantive. Here it's a substantive. Well, the rich guy is Artaxerxes Longimanus. Okay? Giving him the money to rebuild the walls. You can read all about it in Nehemiah. First couple of chapters. Okay? So in 52 days he rebuilds the wall. So obviously it's just the wall. It's not the whole city that was down. You don't rebuild a whole city in 52 days. Okay? Deaths. Well, it could have been the deaths of millions of people. This time could have ended if Jerusalem wasn't protected. But it was. The city was already rebuilt when Nehemiah went there, but the walls were down. And there were a lot of deaths that were avoided, with the rich man and his deaths. Okay? See the dual entendre of the words? Okay, and there's more to it than that, but I'm just trying to come up with quick things I can say to show you that there is an intended dual entendre. Okay, so this is 444 BC, and our next stop is 6 years later at 438 BC. All right, and there's nothing, I don't know of any particular thing that he's benchmarking to, and he might not be benchmarking to that particular event, because this is not, these are clauses, but they're not complete clauses like they should be. This is not a whole verse until the end. Okay, so Elo Hamas Asa, there was no violence. He never did any violence. That's what that clause says. Walo Mirma Bifu, and there was no deceit in his mouth. Okay? In other words, Israel was loyal during this time. That's the basic tenor of it. And she was. Now, at this point, right here, at syllable 357, it's 432 BC. Okay? Now, there isn't anything particular that I know of that was significant about that. So he's not necessarily benchmarking every single clause to a significant part of history, but they always add up to segments that are significant, like this one ends at 460 BC and begins at 467 BC, which is the voting window. This one, here in verse 10, the end of verse 10, right here, this is 397 BC. Okay? At the end of verse 10. 397 BC was the close. Look at this. Oh, please. My computer's really slow. 397 BC was the close. Oh, please don't bug out on me, computer. 397 BC, right here. Right here, see, I'm moving the cursor in the middle of the screen. 397 BC is the close of the voting window. So Isaiah is tracking the voting window when he does this. See, right here is the close of the voting window. So he's benchmarking the close of the voting window, making sure it's divisible by 7. He made this divisible by 7. I do not know what is the significance of 432 BC, where he also makes it significant, divisible by 7. I don't know what that significance is yet. I have to research it. Okay? Because he's benchmarking other events besides Israel, other events in the world besides Israel that have an impact on Israel, but I haven't tracked them all yet. Okay? But this one is real obvious. 397 BC. This is when canon closed. This is when the voting window closed. This is the 49 weeks of Daniel right here. I think that adds up to 49. Let's see. Oh, please. My computer is really going slow. 6 plus 9 plus 8 plus 9 plus 9. And not quite. Let me see. 49. 49 minus 6 minus, I'm going back one clause prior, minus 6 minus 9 minus 8 minus 9. It's going to have a rounding problem. Minus 9. Yeah, we're going to have a 2-year rounding problem. Okay. The 49 weeks starts here. Okay, and we got a rounding problem, so it might be, sort of on the tail end. I haven't worked out all the rounding yet that he's doing and why he's doing it that way. Okay, but here you're looking at the 49 years, the 7 weeks in Daniel 9:25, which also answered Daniel's meter, and when I get to Daniel you'll see that, because Daniel specifically asks for this, and God grants it explicitly in Daniel 9:25, as we all can read in English, but we just don't know where it comes from. Well, it's coming first from here, because Daniel's invoking this whole period here that Isaiah is talking about. Okay? At this point, Isaiah inserts a 364-year period in ellipsis right here between verses 10 and 11, where I'm using the white. He's inserting that period because that's the length of time the temple stood. And according to God's rules for time, because it stood that long, that time, if it was rebuilt, gets to be reimbursed, and Daniel actually asks for it in the meter of his prayer, which we'll see. Daniel knows, therefore, about this ellipsis, just like he knew about this ellipsis here for David. 252 years are in ellipsis here between Isaiah 52:15 and Isaiah 53:1. 364 years are in ellipsis, and that's what part of the 62 weeks ends up being, which Daniel's going to ask for in the meter, and God's going to reply to explicitly in Daniel 9:25. 62 weeks equals 434 years, which is equal to 364, the time the temple stood, plus 70. And 70 is a reimbursement for the previous 70, which ran from 516 BC to 446 BC. Okay, and that ended basically here, okay, in the Isaiah timeline. So Daniel is looking at this annual chronology of Isaiah, which is why I'm going through it now, in order to craft his prayer. And he's doing this, he's using the same style, he's using the kings, and he's using the future history of Israel, except that once he gets here, which was the voting period beginning, that's Daniel 9:14 at that point. He's finished, and then he goes into all the math that's inherent in this section here in Isaiah 53, 9 through 12, including the 364 years that are in ellipsis here in Isaiah.